So as U.S. Congress faces another funding deadline, the threat of a government shutdown looms. Key programs and public services in the United States could be forced into limbo as partisan deadlock intensifies and Treasury warnings mount. Reggie Cecchini joins us now from Washington to get us updated. Tell us what's going on south of the border. Reggie, we appreciate this as always. So let's talk about how we got here and the current status of negotiations.
Right. So there is about a year's worth of daylight between Republicans and Democrats right now, and up to the point on Monday when congressional leadership met at the White House to try and find a path forward, there was a potential here for negotiations to continue, and they ultimately broke down. So what we have right now is the United States standing at a fiscal cliff. Republicans are blaming Democrats, saying they're standing in the way of the spending bills being put forward. Democrats are arguing Republicans are not giving in to their demands to ensure that health care spending and funding is not cut from the spending bill, and that's why the United States is where it is. There is simply no room for either of these parties to negotiate with each other any further, even though there are threats that could impact millions of Americans as a result.
Okay, you say a year's worth of daylight, except there are only hours left until the deadline. We've seen similar deadlines in the past, and at the 11th hour, more than likely they've come to an agreement, although we have seen in the past shutdowns of, extended periods, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if this shutdown happens, it'll be the 15th since 1981. It will be the first since 2018, the second under a Trump administration. What's different about this one, number one, is that there doesn't really seem to be any will here for either of these parties to be making any compromise. But what's also different is the fact that in the previous shutdown, it was only a partial government shutdown, and that's because the Congress had been able to put through a couple of different spending bills of the 12. So when the shutdown happened, those agencies weren't affected. Congress has passed 0 of the 12 spending bills right now. So what's different about this one is that it will be an entire full government shutdown. Now, there will be tens of thousands of people showing up to work, simply not getting paid, but this is going to impact every single government-funded agency.
All right, so let's talk about that. Expand on the impacts. You talk about the jobs. You talk about, obviously, being able to borrow is a big part as well. What is impacted across the country?
Right. So anything that is a government-funded employee is either going to find itself sitting at home or going into work and not getting paid. Now, there are some exceptions here. The IRS will still see many of its workers going into the office, Department of Homeland Security, the Pentagon, the military. These are all going to be deemed essential employees, and they will be showing up to work. The same with the TSA, Border Patrol, and air traffic controllers. But again, they're all showing up to work without a paycheck. And what that means and what it meant back in 2018 was the longer this went on, the last one was 30 days, the more people started to do these call-outs or calling in sick, and therefore it results in a slowdown of the process. So think about it if you're at an airport, TSA, if there are fewer people showing up to work because they're not getting paid because they're calling in sick now, that means that lines could get longer. Lines could get longer at the border. When it comes to borrowing, look, this could have an impact on the ability for some people to get insurance. Flood insurance won't be able to be paid out, and because of that, people may not be able to get a home if their mortgage or their loan is tied to a need to have flood insurance. So this is a situation that starts in Washington and then it ripples out beyond through all 50 states. And then the longer this goes on, it could start to have a global impact, because if this goes on long enough, there are also debt ceiling conversations that need to happen later this year. And if the U.S. starts to worry about defaulting on its debt, that becomes a global issue.
All right, so just hours left. I mean, what is the outlook right now? Any real negotiation going on, or there's basic stalemate?
Well, look, Democrats and Republicans are still trying to blame each other, and they've been laying the groundwork for this blame game for weeks. And it also is worth pointing out, Republicans took last week off, so there was very little room to negotiate. We know the Senate is going to continue to bring a spending bill forward to be voted on. Democrats say they will continue to vote against it, meaning that the longer this goes on through the day on Tuesday, the closer we get to this shutdown actually happening on Wednesday. And it is worth pointing out, for some pressure here, Anthony, Donald Trump said if the shutdown goes forward, the White House will move forward with a reduction in force and further fire people from the government. So people will be furloughed, and now there is a risk that more and more people will simply just be fired.
All right, time is of the essence. We're watching this closely. We appreciate the update, Reggie. Thank you so much. That is Reggie Cecchini joining us from Washington.